Good afternoon, my name is Vanessa Garcia, and today we're going to be discussing EDTP 4302 CAA number 1. To begin, we have a 5th grade math STAR test from 2021, and it begins with Spencer needs to balance his April budget, and we're given his income, allowance, and after-school job, which sums up to $70, and his expenses, cell phone, piano lessons, entertainment, and savings, which add up to $80. And now the question is, what can he do so that his budget is balanced? Increase his savings this month by $10, increase his allowance by $5, decrease his piano lessons by $5, or decrease his entertainment costs by $10. Now, we want to believe that because this question is a recent test question from 2021, that wouldn't have bias, and that students would be able to readily answer this question with the content that they have learned and from throughout the year and apply it to this question. However, this question does have biases, which may make it difficult for students to answer it and focus instead on the question itself rather than the knowledge that they have. And we're going to go ahead and explain that within questions 1 through 4. So to begin, what cultural background or knowledge does this question assume? To begin, this question assumes that students have personal experience with personal finance. Now, this isn't true of all cultures, and this has a bias where it takes American culture and creates the assumption that students have this prior experience. So as Wright 2019 in page 132 explains, this question requires familiarity with cultural norms and practices of white middle-class Americans. Now, for American children growing up, it is very common in which they are able to receive an income, such as with their chores, with different tasks, or a job. However, this isn't going to be true for all cultures. And in other cultures, a lot of times, parents are the ones who take charge of the finances, and students are not involved with that financial decision-making at all. For example, my mom growing up, she was not allowed to have a job until she graduated college, and because my grandparents wanted her to focus on education. And if a student does not have this prior knowledge of finances, then it'll make it difficult to answer this question. And this ties along with question number 2. So what might be difficult linguistically about this question for emergent bilinguals? Now, this question can be difficult because it creates assumptions that students know all these different terms, including budgeting a balance, income, and expenses. Now, if a student doesn't understand finances, then they're not going to understand these different terms that are associated with finances. So as Wright explains in page 132, this test becomes instead a test of English reading comprehension and not the construct the test was designed to measure, which in this case is math. And so the students are going to struggle with understanding what is this question even asking and what does it want me to do. And now that's why it's important that we explain within a test question these different terms, and we do not assume that students have this prior knowledge or experience. And we're going to go ahead and go into what I believe would allow for students to better be able to answer this question and how I would rephrase this question. The way that I would rephrase this question is by providing more context behind the actions that Spencer's taking. So what I've created is Spencer is currently working an after-school job, and he also receives money from his parents for completing his chores. Spencer's income is how much he makes, while Spencer's expenses show how much he spends. In order to balance his budget, or to make the total of his income and expenses equal, what can Spencer do? And now, this allows for students to understand what each of these terms mean so that they are able to recognize what skills, math skills, that they are supposed to apply within this situation. So rather than the ambiguity of what does budgeting a balance even mean, we recognize that it means to equal out that expenses and income. And so this aligns with Wright's idea that for assessment of emergent bilinguals to be valid and fair, it's essential that they too use language flexibility, creating affordances for home language as well as practices in the new language. If our purpose is to measure a student's understanding of math content, then assessments must be created that allow for this knowledge rather than language proficiency to be what is truly measured. So this allows for the students to realize that we are trying to figure out how we can change his income or his expenses in order to balance that budget. And then finally, how do you think you can prepare students for standardized questions? Now, standardized questions, this is not often the norm for a lot of, this may not be the norm for other cultures. And this is why it's important that students have confidence in their content learning so that they can apply their learning within these tests. So the way that I would do this to prepare students for standardized questions is first include accommodations within my lesson. So make sure that they have time, make sure that they're working with other students, and make sure that they have their language needs and their vocabulary. And going off of vocabulary, Echevarria explains that it's important to teach, review, and assess English learners' understanding of the cross-curricular process, function, words, and terms are often found in test questions. Now, if students feel that they have a solid foundation of the content that they're learning, then they're going to feel ready for that test. And they're going to have confidence of the different terms that they need to know, as well as the content that they're supposed to know. And we can also do informal assessments, making sure that students are keeping track within these throughout the lesson up to that point of that formal assessment. And finally, this allows to ensure that my students know the content that they're learning rather than be solely focusing on just those linguistics, and that they will feel prepared. And here are my references, and I want to thank you so much for listening to this presentation. And this is so important, and I hope that y'all were able to learn more. Thank you so much.